There it is. We're live. As people flood in, before we went live, there's a display of swordsmanship. What happened exactly, Mike? You said you had a sword that you found at your house?
So the story is apparently my parents found it in the basement, and it was just there when they got the house. And so the theory is that whoever owned the house before them served, was in Japan, and did the probably not right thing of taking a souvenir home and just left it there. And so
where exactly in the house was this found, if you don't mind me asking?
In a old dingy basement.
Okay.
Just think like, stone and brickwork and everything. A lot of cobwebs. Definitely some bad juju down there.
That's wild. Yeah, we're interrupting Juri from his sword training right now, I think.
Yeah.
But we're glad you're here with us, Juri. And Philip's got probably the biggest sword back there somehow.
What's up, everyone? It doesn't even fit on the camera.
It doesn't fit into the camera.
This is great. I should just show up to every meeting, just like with this. Like, who's going to disagree with me?
It's got big enforcer energy to it, Philip.
You get hit with the Omni Slash, and your opinion is moot.
I got that reference, actually. I'm proud of myself. Final Fantasy 7. Anyways.
All right. All business now. No more fun.
Yes, let's get to business because we already have some questions coming in. So, folks, we are here to talk about all the new cool stuff for TypeScript, and also say hi to Josh Van Allen. What's up, man? How's it going?
Josh.
But this has been this last week has been really big for us because in some ways it's an adjustment from the way we've always done stuff. But this has been for us, we have been the OG TypeScript monorepo tool. And especially when we first got started, a lot of the tools that we're using now just weren't out there. So we ended up doing things a certain way because I think it was more pragmatic. And then we kind of evolved to get to where we are now. So I don't know, Victor, maybe do you want to talk about the origins of NX, how we got started, how all this stuff kind of kicked off?
The origin, it sounds very, the TypeScript monorepo support required a few things for us, and a lot of tools at that point use the same approach for stitching different packages together within the repo, which is by using aliases or some form of aliasing. When you're saying, if you see this import, it points over here. So load the code from over there. The TypeScript itself had this support with path mappings, right? But it's not just path mappings you have to use. There are other tools you have to configure in the same fashion. The constructor map saying, if you see this, point over there, right? That was sort of the default way of doing things. We, embraced it. It actually works reasonably well. In some ways, developer experience with that way is very nice, right? But there are downsides, and we'll talk about downsides later on, because I'm a strong believer that the main thing that makes you successful in dev tooling is the ease of adoption. Not even the ease of use. The ease of use can be very hard down the road, but ease of adoption, right? Can you start using stuff in a very clear way? Build a large project or a project, stitch packages together with almost zero friction, right? That is why it took us some time to move from the original way, the project references way, to the new way we're going to discuss today, because we wanted to preserve the ease of adoption and the ease of use where things that just work. You don't have to think about it, right? And anyway, I think we are successful. I think the new way is just as easy to use, but a lot faster.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. Especially when we bring in the sync generators. I think that was really the one key point that made everything sync for me. But yeah, I think we got Philip coming back in. But yeah,
that's right.
Cool. So yeah, so the sync generators are awesome. Keeping everything in sync, and I think really hitting just the point you made, Victor. It's a lot of this is about ease of use, and we probably could have done the project references switch from path aliases to project references earlier, but the ease of use probably wouldn't have been there until we have all the pieces in place that we have now. So
that's right. And I'll tell you why it's tricky to do it well, right? I think the biggest issue with a lot of dev tooling is when you have multiple sources of like multiple data structures, sources of truth that have to be kept in sync, right? At the moment they're out of sync, weird behavior emerges, right? Like just nothing makes sense, weird errors show up, right? That's the main source of confusion in a lot of tooling, especially like in JavaScript tooling, where you don't have like a single tool like Gradle that does everything. No, there are like 50 tools that barely work together, right? And the JavaScript / TypeScript ecosystem is unique this way, right? And in this case, there are the source of truth are you have packages, right? You have TypeScript projects like tsconfigs, right? You have actual imports, and all of those things have to make sense together. And the moment they are not aligned, okay, everything falls apart. When we use project references, it's easier because we're basically saying we maintain this map, right? And the only source of truth in that case is your imports. If you have an import, the edge between packages is drawn, there is nothing to be kept in sync. Right? When you have one thing, magically works, right? So here we knew that to do project refs well, we have to have two things at a minimum to be kept in sync. So how do we do it ergonomically, sort of thing, right? And that's why the sync generators were so useful.
Yeah. So for people who maybe aren't as familiar with our tooling, sync generators are something we've introduced so that when you run tasks, we actually will run the sync generators to check if your workspace is in sync, and we'll automate that changing of your file system to make them in sync. And this comes especially handy here with the improvements we've made to TypeScript. Maybe we can hook into Binary's question here. Excited for the TypeScript improvements. Is this about project references and any love for Next.js? So yes, a lot of this is at a fundamental level. I think we moved from using just TypeScript path aliases as a way of aliasing projects to now using TypeScript project references as a way of creating more boundaries around what your projects are from like a TypeScript project level, and also going from using path aliases as a way of aliasing things to now using the workspaces functionality of your package manager. And this way, we'll, instead of like aliasing the packages, we're making packages. The packages are just named that. So that's kind of how it works now. So
I want to interject here because we've gone around quite a few terms, and I've already seen this come up in a few conversations where people confuse what exactly project references are from like a very, very technical standpoint, because we've talked about them as connecting the different packages the same way that a path alias would, but it's not necessarily connected to how the sub packages get exposed throughout your monorepo, correct?
Right. So Juri, I can also talk about that.
Yeah, this is just an open question. I want to.
Yeah. I like yes, that makes sense.
Yeah,
you know, like,
yeah, that makes sense. Next question.
Okay.
No, absolutely. Like, I mean, earlier this week, I think we had there was Zack's article, which like really went deep into just project references, what they are, etc. And then my second article this week on our blog on nxdev/blog, like I actually did a little deep dive into how you can actually link packages together without actually wanting to go any specific route, but just like starting from, let's just do relative imports, right? Let's try to figure out like how I can connect these, which obviously like in larger reality is not doable, right? And then like going next thing, like what does it mean like if I try to mix in product reference, because obviously we're going that route in the final solution. Yeah, I hate myself on like something. But basically, when I did a deep dive, like you can actually use path aliases and product references together, right? So the one doesn't really exclude the other. They're almost like for different things, right? They're there for different things. So the path alias is just like a nicer way to having like relative imports in the end, right? A product reference is really giving TypeScript a way to understand the structure of your repository. So it's basically almost like our product graph, but we need to teach TypeScript about it, right? So that's what you actually do in these reference files, right? You're saying like, hey, here's my first package, here's my second package, here's the root level one. And so we're constructing this graph for TypeScript. And the main purpose is that it can then basically compile these individual pieces and then also obviously incrementally compile. It's like the consequence of that at that point, right? While if you don't use them, and that's I think the biggest differentiator to understand from the beginning. Exactly, Zack also mentioned it nicely here in the graph and image that you see at the top. If you don't use project reference, like there's one single TypeScript program for your entire repo, and that's what happened with many NX repos as well, where we just use path aliases, and that as your repo grows, like you basically see it mostly in the memory. Like I tried it out on like one of our benchmark repos, and it went up like to 11 gigabytes to just like on type checking, right? Which is like crazy, but it's actually happening, right? Like clients have reached out and mentioned exactly those types of issues, and that's basically what project reference solve. It is not about like the importing and how I resolve packages. We can come to that like maybe later, but that's TypeScript path alias, that's TS path aliases or npm workspaces type of thing, right? That kind of arrange packages such that they can be resolved. So project reference is really about like I would say like at least like I use a mental model like it's for the compilation part, right? So being able to break it up in tiny pieces versus having a gigantic piece, which then obviously is slower, more memory, etc. Right?
So summary, instead of TypeScript looking at something as like this whole directory is my whole entire thing, it's like here's my whole system. This is an isolated piece. This is an isolated piece. This is an isolated piece. Exactly. Here's the ones that connect to each other. Here's that dependency graph.
Exactly. And this also nicely, I mean, once you try to play around with it, you kind of then understand the importance of the sync generator that Zack just mentioned before. Because in these examples that we created here, I mean, we had like 3-4 libs, right? It's pretty easy to set it up. But even then it starts getting annoying, right? Because once you add another lib, well, wait a sec, where do I need to add it, right? Well, I need to import it. But that's actually just like node level-ish solution, right? But then I also need to make sure the references has it, because otherwise TypeScript doesn't understand it, right?
That's right.
And so even at 3-4 libs, it starts getting annoying. And so basically at large workspaces where you would actually need them for the speed and low memory, blah, blah.
That's right.
There's not doable, basically. And I think that's the main reason why it hasn't been adopted until now, because it's just like not feasible at all.
That's right. So if you think about a workspace with like 1,000 packages, which is not uncommon, it happens, right? That's a standard node. So like if you look at this reference has to be per edge in that graph. So in principle, you have like 1 million edges. Okay, it's not going to be 1 million edges. It's going to be less than that. But you're going to have tens of thousands of edges that you have to maintain. You won't be able to maintain them by hand. And the worst case in that situation is not like when you add something, you need to add an edge, but like if you remove an import, you'll be like, okay, now every time you remove one, it's going to be like, do I still need all those edges I'm specifying my TS configs, right? And your import's really the source of truth, because if you need a piece of code, you import and you use it. If you don't need it, your VS Code / IntelliJ / whatever AI thing, right? It's going to remove the imports, right? The imports already managed for you, right? So the imports should be the source of truth, which is what we implement, right? We rely on the imports. The imports have to, like, because you need to use them. They're very organic, right? The rest of it should be just maintained automatically, because the rest of it you like don't have a reason to maintain. So you're just going to have all provisioned edges, right? If you don't have any kind of sync generator in place, right?
Yeah. And it was just like last week at our office hours in Discord, there was one person actually saying like they were starting to implement project reference manually because they have a monorepo. I believe it's like a design system library or something, but they have like 700 plus libraries, right? And they were exactly facing these TypeScript issues and started to actually start linking it, but it's obviously super tedious. And then now see that we have support actually probably gonna try to adopt that, right, and see how it works out there. But like that just to say like it's totally realistic to have like 500, 600, 700 plus libraries in a repo.
Yeah, can you maybe describe the user experience? Like what actually happens when you add an import and project refs are not in sync? Like, because like we talk about the sync generator, but it's integrated very kind of organically as part of your like NX usage. So what happens if I added an import and a project graph isn't there, or I removed an import and a project graph is no longer required?
I kind of want to do it live. Can we do that? Can we make new? Yeah,
Go for it.
Let's see if we can do that. I'm going to share my screen, and maybe Victor, you can drop me a little bit, but that just means tell me what to do. Sorry.
Yeah, I was like, okay, that is a very interesting request. I'm not sure how to.
Sorry. So
Yes.
let's maybe just start with like a fresh create NX workspace.
Yes, you're not sharing anything, by the way. But once you share it.
There we go. Sorry. And we'll just use like the TypeScript preset.
Yeah,
We could probably have used any of them at this point
we could.
because this is what we use for everything now. But it's been here for TypeScript for a little bit. Sure.
Yeah. Ooh, better touch.
I don't need it anymore after the last update. I don't like the little borders around all my windows though.
You already tried to create full stream.
Oh, I see.
It's like
Name
common
it
name.
something else.
I've done too many of these for, let's say,
Yes.
call it for TS stream.
Yes.
There you go. I'm skipping prettier this time.
You're just going to tell the editors, no, this is how I want my code formatted. Pure chaos.
I
Can
was
make
trying out
tabs
some
and
things with
spaces.
I was trying out some things with Biome. It was like way too aggressive for my taste, with the defaults at least. But for TS stream, yeah, you can see all the different four whatevers.
Yeah, I think you're brave by showing all the folders you have. You know, I like much more like managed environment. There's nothing pops up anywhere. Clean screen.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any shame about any of that. Yeah, see, messing around with Biome stuff. But okay, so we have just like a fresh workspace now, so there's no packages yet.
Yep.
And what I normally do, let's just pop open some of this. We can say xg lib is even. This is the one I always go to. Just use TSC.
Yeah.
Oh, I actually probably should. Let me actually undo that because I meant to put it inside of packages. We'll just load away this way. There you go. So packages / is even. There we go. All right, I'm just going to do an is odd real quick. Cool. Now we can jump into the.
Can you check it in?
Wow.
So once you generate both of them, so we have a clean
Yeah,
slate.
let's
So
do
it's
that.
easier to see. Yeah. Dude, you're not using cursor? What's going on? Okay.
Sorry, I'm not. I'm like.
Don't apologize, because I'm right there with you, Zach.
I also type slow, so apologies. But okay, we're here. So we've just got like the boilerplate stuff.
Added some hacker news energy in here. You have to use cursor everywhere.
All right. So we're saying is odd is just a number, and we'll return like a Boolean here. So we'll actually implement it here. So let's use, yeah. See, I use that at least, Victor. Are you proud of me?
I can tell you stories about my trying to make AI help me, and it's not not always, doesn't always work, I would say.
Yeah. All right. So now, well, let's do for is even. So we actually want to import now from our thing.
Yeah.
So we'll just say not is odd. And I don't have my stuff. I don't have it yet because I think we need to run an npm install. What did I call my org here? I think it was like my or for TS stream. Yeah. Cool. So here we would go. I think we can just like, can we run a build? Will the sync generator actually take care of running the npm install for me too? Or
No, you need to have npm install.
okay, there we go.
And for those who might be wondering, why do we need the npm install?
Yes. Does anyone else want to answer that? I can if.
Yeah.
No.
So then, we should run npm install for you once you generate a lib. I think the fact that we don't is weird, right? So I think
that should be happening though already. I was kind of surprised that it isn't there. But like we will
That's
see.
right.
Yeah,
That's
I think
right.
there should be
So,
already there.
I think it's happening for other generators because it's per generator. Like I think it happens for React, not the stacks, but not for TS. But let's follow up note for Jack npm install. Okay, cool.
So what does the npm install like solve there? Like, what does it do?
So if you open Node modules, Zach, show what's going on there, and then find your 4TS stream. So it put those packages over here such as they're resolvable, all right? So meaning that when you see that import over there, we don't want to use some magic string matching, which we could. We like magical string matching. This is every dev tool builder likes matching strings in weird ways to connect things, right? But in here, we basically we want to say instead, we want like it being resolvable normally, such that Node can resolve it and TypeScript can resolve it via Node resolution, right? And when like if that happens, okay, then that import will work and magic, and we can we basically know what the import is, what is odd is, and the rest of it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So specifically, what we're looking at here in my file system right here is a symbolic link right now that because we're using npm workspaces, this is how npm workspaces is going to take like our actual file system and incorporate it into Node modules as if it were just a normal package. So that's why we see like this is a symbolic link. So when I go to this, it's actually just redirecting me to this other part of my file system, which is actually in our workspace. So that's where that comes in.
And then
I guess,
how are those getting? How is that being set up as a workspace?
yes. So
specifically?
this is where it gets interesting because it actually depends on the package manager you use. Each one has a little bit different implementation and how you set it up and how it gets used. And X actually manages all that for you. So a lot of the times I forget how they work exactly, but because I used npx to create this workspace, we used npm as our package manager. And so we're using npm workspace functionality here. And so to mark that, we just have this inside of our package JSON. If we're using pm, I believe there's like a workspaces.yaml file that gets created that has essentially the same information. But this is how we're saying this is where you can find workspaces inside of this repo. And whenever the reason why we needed to run npm install there was because npm now knows this is where your workspaces are. When we do the install, it's actually going to take those files and put them into our Node modules. So before I ran the install, we actually didn't have those inside of our Node modules directory. And that's why it just won't work.
To make it clear for folks, we do run PMs to another stacks, and we're going to run it in here. I think the TS stack is just missing. So the generators, the lib generator in the JavaScript lib generator should run the PM install. So okay, well, in this case, Zack had to do it by hand, but in general, it will be handled in automatic.
Yeah. We'll fix that. But now we can go ahead and let's take a look actually first, just to see where the project references should go and then where they are. Because right now, is even should depend on is odd. And if we look at our TypeScript references right here, I think it's actually probably going to go into our lib.json. But if we lib is just right now extending this one right here, so we can see we have a reference. We do have a reference to this one here, but that's it, and we extend various other ones. But now let's go ahead and run the build. So we'll say nx build is even, and here's where we get prompted to update that here. So I can hit yes.
Okay.
And coming back to our TS config,
maybe you can zoom out a little bit. It's kind of just one level of
the too big.
Yeah,
just one level.
I'm
so it starts messing with the terminal. I think that is too big.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, cool.
But yeah, At this point, the reference is kept up to date for us. So we actually didn't have to really even know about this, which I like quite a bit.
But show TS config as well. Show TS config because it's two files, right? So
yes.
So this one is the same, right?
Yes.
And so the TS config is the editor context, and the TS config.lib would be the build context or the type checking context.
Yeah, plus there's the root level one as well, right? Which we
that's right.
Update when we generate.
Yeah,
so I think that's where you can see the TypeScript level project graph if you want. Like if you go to the root level TypeScript file, you can see there once we generate the library, exactly this one here, you see like it points to the package that we have, right?
That's
This is happening like whenever we generate the library with the generators. And so
yeah.
here, this is like the top level node if you want for that tree. And so it starts like here's the branching out to these packages. Then if you go to the packages, they have dependencies as we just saw that points to the
That's
other
right.
ones, and that way ahead, right?
That's right.
It's
That's
it's
right.
also important to note maybe like for those that already have been using NX before, like the tsconfig base at this point, before it had the path aliases, right? So it was kind of like seen as if like that handled also the linking to some degree, right? Because like it had these redirects. Now
Right.
the tsconfig base is mostly just for extending like the build properties, right? If you go
That's
in
right.
there, there's the module stuff, all that type of things, which then the individual packages just extend from. And so it's just like seeing as like here we configure the generic workspace-wide build properties of TypeScript, and each package can
Right.
extend from it and just adjust it. There's
That's
no
right.
more path alias redirecting, etc., happening there.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I
Which
want to
has
do one
another-
last thing with the
Yeah,
demo, and then
go
I'll
ahead.
stop plaguing y'all with my bad typing and my bad presentation skills. But the
You're
big
doing
thing
great.
is let's
great.
switch it. Thanks, Victor. I can always count on you. The big thing is let's switch the import around. So like we actually switch around how this gets implemented. So instead, we'll make is odd depend on is even, and we'll actually implement things inside of is even. Turn. I was too self-deprecating of myself there for sure. So thanks for helping me, Victor. But use all the tools like Victor had mentioned. Like it automated the imports for us. We're not using the import anymore. My IDE just cleaned that up. Now we can run the same build again. Actually, we'll just build is odd so we can make sure we exercise everything. And as we do that, we can see the TS config for both packages got updated. And this is, I think for me, this reflects the resolution of most of the pain points that a lot of people see. Like what you should be doing is not worrying about these other levels of things where it's like, how do we got to make sure we keep this linking up. We got to make sure this file is manually maintained. It should just be,
That's right.
how do we want to architect our app? And
That's right.
you should just code to do that. And the tooling should fill in the gaps. So that's pretty much what we've provided here. So.
Yeah, and it's important that I think it lines up in general with how NX always worked, where in many other tools you had to manually craft your project graph and say this is my this depending on that, right? And you specify all the nodes and edges. It basically every other tool by NX, right, by hand. You say this is my project, it depends on this. You draw those edges by hand in some configuration file, right? Whether it's a build file or some JSON file at the root or whatever, right? And we always believe that for a large enough repo, this is, again, the cost of onboarding or the ease of use, the ease of adoption is really suffering if you have to maintain the graph by hand. Because what you want to do is to author your code. The graph with a thing that is like, in a way, if you have to maintain it by hand. Right? And NX lets you maintain it by hand. But generally speaking, we always assume that the vast majority of your graph, 99%, should be derived from your code. So you write your code naturally like you would. You don't worry about the monorepo and SOV or whatever. And NX looks at it, uses some ways of introspection, figures it out, derives, and then stores the project graph secretly in some cache file such as it's fast and incrementally updates it or whatever. For the project graphs part, the difference here that we have the project graph, but we also kind of reflect on your source code. That's kind of the difference in behavior, where it's no longer hidden away completely. You see this like the project graphs, the TypeScript graph, as a sort of as a reflection, right, of the graph we think that we derived, right? And we store it in the file system such a TypeScript can read it, right? If TypeScript could get this information from us, right, without us storing on disk, okay, it would be even better. But that's how TypeScript works, and in this case, we use our project graph to teach TypeScript by storing this information on disk. But the property still holds. You do not author project graph by hand. You don't maintain edges by hand. You don't worry about the project graph most of the time. The vast majority of the time, you just author your code as you would in a single bucket of code, right? We derive the thing for you. We teach TypeScript. We make it fast, whatever, make the editor fast, where you don't have to worry about it as much, right? The only thing right now you worry about is that warning will pop up once in a while saying, hey, what we've learned, the most up-to-date version of the project graph is ahead of your TypeScript configuration. Let us flash the changes down to that configuration so it's in sync, all right? And that's about it. That's the only time you need to worry about it. So it's basically almost never, and you just need to say yes, and you don't worry about it anymore, right? So, but the property still holds. We strongly believe that you don't have to configure anything. that we need to derive everything from your source code rather than like you're teaching us, right?
Yeah, and I think one big property kind of like to highlight, because it kind of matches exactly this argument here, is like with that new experience, if you want, like what we did is also to generate, like we kind of joked in turn, like we are closer to the platform now, right? We're leveraging the platform, whatever, because we have the npm workspaces for the whole resolution part, right? But also the TypeScript stuff, we don't do anything magic behind the scenes in our custom executors, whatever, but we generate TypeScript product reference valid code. So you could actually, at the root of your project, of your workspace, you can run tsc-b, which would then leverage the information, just do type checking across the repo, right? And it would work with TypeScript, without an X, etc., right?
So can
I
we
think
say
that's
we
also...
are hashtag using the platform?
Yeah, we should start
yes,
saying that.
Yeah. Yes, 100%.
Printing shirts now.
Yeah, no, but I actually that's a cool part. So now if you throw out an X into a monorepo that doesn't use an X, right? You run an init command, that stuff works. So thing is fast. You don't need to do anything. We figured it out. Project Crystal plugins, or like how Next works now, the plugins will kick in. We'll analyze your TS configs. We'll configure your type checking, your caching, distribution. It's like a perfect valet. That's what an X is, right? It doesn't ask, like, you don't have to tell the valet to do anything. They're just there and they do the work by noticing what you need, right? An X is like a Jeeves, right? Sort of thing, right? Like that's kind of the magical property why people like it, is that the cost of using it, especially for larger monorepos, the mental overhead, right, is low.
It also does something else that I'm going to now share my screen. I'm going to do it impromptu. Come on.
Mike's gonna make me feel bad. He's gonna show off his
No.
Vim stuff. And I'm just gonna be
I
like,
have my thing all
Next-
set up
next
beforehand.
one.
I don't need to do anything. Zach, want to throw that in there? All right. So this is actually like a whole, like, it's a benefit, but it's also like kind of a side effect of the project references, is that you actually now have more correct types, which this is like the old path aliases options.
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
this
Gotcha, Mike.
doesn't this isn't like anything. Well, it's quite a bit of packages, but we should in theory know everything about this program, right? So if we try to get the reference for this, it only returns one instance of it, which is technically not correct. But in like the new version, no project references, this is all just compiler options at this point. We try to get the reference for all of this. It's going to take a little bit because it's a larger system, but we get all the correct references from across the entire monorepo, because now TypeScript can actually be informed about, again, all those different edges.
Amazing.
And knows where every symbol is going.
I like how it's a more correct types. It's not. It's just correct. so.
I mean, technically, this isn't wrong. It's just not. It's like it's 10%. This is 100%.
Yes. So WebStorm before could figure it out through just sheer will. All right.
Yes.
But now every editor, like whether you use WebStorm, VS Code, clones of VS Code, NeoVim, or whatever, right, will be able to find it correctly. So I think it's a big deal.
That's all I'm going to be able to do, because that is far too much coding live for my comfort level.
Right.
You did great, Mike.
Thank you.
Cool.
So one of the big things that we talked about in the content this week was just like the performance increases, and one thing that I was curious if y'all could talk about, it's like how, like, being able to divide things up into separate build tasks or separate type check tasks. I actually didn't understand like how much of that was like happening in TypeScript with the way like TSC works versus like what NX is doing to like be able to put things in order to build them correctly. Could you talk a little bit about like what part of this is like NX versus which part of this is like just TypeScript and the project references? Like, is NX just taking care of like the niceties of like updating those configuration files, and now we're like handing things off to TypeScript?
No, that's a good question. I think that fundamentally, and maybe Juri can show your, or someone can show your tweet stream, because I think the tweet stream illustrates perfectly, right? We believe that at a certain point, right, executing things on one machine just won't suffice. Right? Your project is too big. If you run it on a single agent in CI, it's going to be slow. So we strongly believe that things have to be distributable. Right? TypeScript doesn't do any distributable part. It doesn't do distribution, right, at all. The second part we believe in, that things has to be they have to be replayable. Right? Replayable meaning that if I type check this library already elsewhere, we don't have to retype check it. Again, TypeScript doesn't implement any replayability. Those two properties are the properties of an X. Right? What we had before, from a lot of people, over and over again, is that okay, you have the distribution and replayability and cacheability, but it doesn't work for builds. That's what we heard, right? So okay, your tests are distributed, your lints are distributed, and they're cached. So you run like a third of your tests because of cacheability. You run some lints, and it runs on 20 machines. But there is like a 20-minute build, and it's just 20-minute build. It's either fully cached or fully missed, right? And that was a big deal. That was a big problem, right? For a lot of like big projects that some of the folks we work with closely, some teams at large organizations, they have massive applications that take a very long time to build, right? What we're doing now by utilizing project references, we're allowing for much more efficient partitioning of type checking into this graph of type checks. We could do it before. It just was exceptionally inefficient. So the overhead was so high that it was impractical, right? So a lot of folks could try to use buildable libs or increment and like that stuff at scale. We're like, okay, technically it's incremental, but it's 5 times as bad in the worst case scenario. So yeah, no, thank you. All right. With project refs and the way we do it now, right? When you type check in CI a particular lib, we are going to cache the result of that type checking, right? In our system somewhere, right? We would cache the build info files and the rest. So when you need to type check the slip again in some future CI execution, right? We're going to retrieve it, and suddenly the type check could be just fully free. Or if something else needs to be type checked that relies on that lib, it won't have to build the representation of the lib from scratch. It's going to receive the build info file for that lib, for the child lib, right? So type checking is substantially faster, right? So yes, like what we did allows us to efficiently split one type checking kind of ball of execution into a graph of it. What an X then does, and that's an X does it ergonomically, and I really believe ergonomics is a super big deal. What an X does after that, it says, okay, this graph now, okay, we're going to use our system that we use for testing other things. We're going to split across lots of machines. We can type check things across many machines. We can reuse type checking across machines. We can reuse type checking across CI executions, right? That's fully the annex part, right? So annex could do it already. That was already in place. It's just the way we did type checking before didn't really work with this execution model, the distributed execution model. The new way does work. And we have like really good results where your build time
yeah, I can show it if you want.
Yeah,
I can.
Yeah,
I have
sure.
it open just quickly.
There you go.
Basically, I just updated before the stream the blog post that we have on the last one that talks about the new experience. That had the section about performance, where I just go a bit like into these details what Victor just mentioned. But basically, what we did is we had we created 2 benchmark repos. Basically, the old setup, like old in quotes, like that doesn't use TypeScript project reference. Here you can see like these libs don't really have a type check command. The type checking just happens here at the root level. And here we have a Vite, so we're in one way even lucky because like Vite splits up build and type checking already. So you have a build and type check. So at least like you can kind of split these two. Like in some setups, like with Webpack, you actually need to do additional work if you want to split them out because very often it just happens as part of the build. The type checking build is all one go, right? And so what we tried is like with the experiment that with the new setup, where here we have this exact same structure, but now each of these libraries has such a type check command, which means now we can run it individually at each of these libraries. Right. And so looking at the runs, then this is happening on nxCloud, but even if you run it locally, right? If you run it locally, you can parallelize, have like 3-4 type checks running parallel on your machine, and it would also be faster, right? Here's just like you could, in addition, also run it across different machines. And so here, this is basically an nxCloud run. You can see here the run type check and build. We just created this new, and this is like a nice plug for this new analysis thing that we worked on, that Chao and our team worked on, which kind of shows you how the things break up, right, in a distribution. So you can literally see it as agent 0, 1, 2, and like what ran on agent 1, 2, and 3, etc. Right? And so here you can see our two commands that we can actually just distribute, which is type check and build. There's no more that we can actually distribute. And definitely, therefore, basically, as a result, the whole CI time is basically the slowest task, right? In this case, it's like these 8 minutes 40 roughly. And so if we switch over to exactly the same run with the individual type check commands, you can see now each of these ran at least 4 of these type checks on the same agent. And you can already see like the entire time is reduced, right? So you see here we're roughly around 3.5 minutes, more or less, which is the slowest one. And we could then potentially throw more machines on it. So let me go in, let's say in here. I think this was 5 agents even. At some point, obviously, you reached like the limit where here you can already see, right? Like the distribution is no more uniform. So probably 4 agents is the maximum that helps here. And the reason is because here there's the slowest one, which is 2 minutes 30. And so it doesn't go faster than that. Because there's one type check for one lib that just takes 2 minutes. So we can't really break that up. But I think that's the main advantage that Victor kind of brought up, right? Like now you have the possibility to split it up. And all of these are not cached, right? So I intentionally didn't use any caching in here. And so ideally in a second run, one of these is cached, so you don't even run it, right? So it becomes potentially even faster.
That's right. So we see it with tests, for example, that like a lot of the times, only about a third of the packages based on the stats we have are being retested. So the rest are retrieved from cache. The cache is actually like used a lot, right? In this case, you can also imagine that the amount of total type check and compute, which right now is split across machines, could be reduced, right? In terms of, by using caching, right? Let's say by a factor of 2 or 3, right? That doesn't mean that CI will be faster. The slowest task could still be 2 minutes or whatever, right? But in practice, it works out because usually the same agent that do type checking will also do test and lint. So, if they do less type checking, they can run tests quicker, etc. So overall, it will, reduce your clock time as well, in addition to compute.
Yeah, exactly. I think one thing to address as well, just because I saw some comments come up like related to Angular, like we're talking to the team actually actively right now. So because right now, for instance, the whole experience, this one is still apart from the TS preset. If you create a new workspace, is behind the -- workspaces flag. So we're not generating this out of the box. If you create a new setup, right, create a next workspace, won't generate this unless you provide the flag. And the main reason is we want to polish a couple of different things, make sure the experience works, that you get autocomplete support in your edit as soon as possible. Because as you have seen before, right, like you need to have the npm install, which should be fixed unless otherwise we were going to fix it when you generate the library. But there's other edge cases where if things are buildable, obviously you haven't built that already. And so how would the editor be able to figure out like what it should refer to, right, in the case of buildable libraries? So we're kind of trying to figure out how can we make it such that the experience is exactly the same that you had before with path aliases. But now we work with the platform and you still get the same experience, right? So that's kind of the goal. Right. So that's what's happening in the next couple of weeks mostly. And Angular right now doesn't work. So we've been looking into it. So in the sense of like it breaks if you set certain TypeScript tsconfig properties that TypeScript project reference needs. But we're actively talking to them right now because they're interested obviously in making it work. And so we're trying to figure out like how we can actually fix that. And so that would then mean we can even for Angular generate such setups that benefit from these.
Yes, and for Angular we have a slightly different route as well, in addition to supporting, so early March I think is the current target for something cool will be shown. So stay tuned for that. Yes. So we have smart folks on the team who are making it work. So in basically in a month and a bit, we should see something really cool there. I want to add one point. If you just as a not an answer to anything, but a lot of folks who try to use incremental builds before or buildable libs or whatever, if you have a word like a phrase incremental build or buildable lib and you did it primarily to speed up your builds, right? You just, I want to speed up my builds, I want to do it incrementally. This is the solution, because the main cost of builds and compilation is type checking. And that's what is costly about builds, right? Most of the time. Like, so if you use this, you get most of the incrementality, right? With all, like basically no complexity. Right? It's a much better trade-off, right, than what we offered before with incremental builds. So if you try an incremental builds and you're like, that is not great, this is much better, right? You should be able to kind of incrementally get the same incrementality with like I don't know, 1,000 times less effort, and with much better trade-offs, right, in terms of developer experience.
And there is still a use case for buildable libraries, even with this. And I think we talk about it a little
100%.
bit in the docs, where there may be something like a leaf node or something. Like my mind is jumping to, if you have like a giant like design system or like a component
Right.
library, it still makes sense to make that buildable, because you might want to publish that out for
Yep.
other repos to consume. But also, if that is something that doesn't have like a lot of churn on day-to-day development and
100%.
is really big, that's still something that like a buildable library can solve for you.
That's right, 100%. I think the use case is there. Publishing is obviously the most important bit, but also if you have if that thing takes 5 minutes to type check and compile whatnot, right? Yes, like 100% make it buildable, right? So and we have a new way of managing those things with watch depths, which I think Juri covers in one of his posts, which honestly was trivial to add. Which is okay. Let's add the thing. It will take about half an hour there. But the developer experience is 1,000 times better. It's just, it's embarrassing that we just didn't do it before, but the new experience is very nice.
So if you're outside the Angular ecosystem, because we still have to get some things working in Angular, what might migration to this start to look like in the future?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the answer is that we are working on some affordances to make this migration easier. It won't be like 100% fully automated, where it's like you had one system, you run a command and everything is bulletproof, and now it's 4 times faster, right? We hope to get to a place by NX21, which is like in April, right, where it's maybe like 90% automated, where we give you a lot of it, and then you spend a day, addressing things that don't, fully line up, right? So by like if you have a massive system, you might want to wait till like NX21 because it would be an easier process. But if you're eager, I cannot stop you, right? So you should.
Yeah, I think the important part there is also to say, like, there's no, like, you could do it now, basically, right? Like, you
That's
can
right.
mix NPM workspaces, like with, let's say, the new approach of linking and TS path alias. You can mix that in the same workspace. And I think even we had videos in the past, even for, let's say you have, let's talk about Angular, like you have multiple Angular CLI workspaces. You could merge them into an NPM workspace, just leave them as is, and X runs them, Angular CLI projects, right? And then slowly kind of start migrating them together and linking them together. Obviously, it's much more manual work involved into that, but that's totally possible. So you can have those two realities at the same time. But yeah, ideally there will be at least some semi-automated fashion where we can figure out like some parts we can just transform over, especially if you have been generating the project, we kind of can know what the structure will look like, right? So that would make it easier. Obviously, if there's lots of customizations that you made, it might be tougher.
Okay, so James said that Jack
already
had it. It's already working. Here we go. Boom.
89%. Okay, forgot what I said.
Yes. So
Launching
that's the
next
speed,
week.
right? Yes. Yeah, it's exciting.
That's awesome. We are running out of time, so I wanted to hit some of the questions here that we've got in chat. I had one question that was maybe a little bit interesting. So this is from Binary 64 again. So how does this tie in with ESM? So like having type module in all package.jsons. I can touch on it a little bit, but I don't think there's anything too interesting about this. So a lot of this comes down to like the way that JavaScript modules are going to work, and so this is going to affect mainly, how your stuff is going to look after it is built. So it's a question of, well, your TypeScript is probably going to look the same in either case. It's just when you are building, what are you outputting it to an ESM output or to a common JS module approach? it doesn't really tie in too much with what we're looking at here. So it's pretty much mostly a moot point for this dimension of things.
Yeah,
we had someone
I think,
ask
like,
about if
and
oh,
it
go ahead.
also, no, sorry, like I was just like saying, yeah, exactly what you mentioned. Like it also depends, like if you don't have buildable libs, right, they will just be consumed by the top level application anyway, right? So because you're pointing to the index.ts files, and so whatever like read, whatever you're using there, that's what it's going to import and like convert that and then spit out whatever you're actually wanting to produce, right? So I think it mostly depends. If you want to have a buildable library and then publish that, and you need to support certain formats, well, then you would need to tweak the TS configs. But again, the cool part is like you have everything in your workspace, right? So there's nothing magic or weird where you would need to kind of break up whatever we do behind the scenes, because we literally don't do anything there, right? So it's all in the TS configs where you can tweak it around. So what I've seen, like if you have mixed workspaces, the mixture between having package.json type module and ES Next versus Node 20, etc., like in these TS configs, could like change how you import stuff. But I personally like the fact that you can just Google for it and you can fix it, right? Because like we just use TS configs, we don't do any magic behind, and so that should help. Or use some LLM, tell you what went wrong.
Yeah, it's less about NX being something that you have to understand, and just being something that you can Google. Something that like NX is there. We're helping you, but we're not getting in the way. We're not adding another level on top that you need to understand. And that's been one of the things I've liked about our direction recently, especially. So so we did address this with Angular. Victor did make an ominous promise about March. So there's some cool things coming for Angular. It does not work with Angular right now, though.
That's right. At some
did
point,
have-
we'll work with Angular.
Soon trademark.
Oh.
Where's the little GIF of like the?
Yeah, forget we said March. We did have this one from Catalina Gable. So can you still limit references through tags? And so this is, I think this is a cool question, because I think Victor had a really good sort of monologue there where he was talking about how NX is about, you write the code and that is your source of truth. You shouldn't be maintaining things manually somewhere else to define how your projects connect to each other. But sometimes it is helpful to make sure that you enforce limits on how projects can connect to each other. And this is something that NX supports via our lint rule that we have, where you can say, hey, if you tag things a certain way, you can make sure certain kinds of libraries don't depend on others. And this is helpful for some things like identifying, hey, we're importing, backend code into our front end package. Don't do that. It's a lint rule that you see pop up right away as soon as that happens. So in that sense, you still kind of can, like, the lint rule is not going away. So you can
That's
still
right.
maintain sort of those limitations, but at like the sort of at the architectural level. And then it kind of permeates through to references, because we're at the end of the
That's
day,
right.
like Victor was saying, project references inside of your TS configs are just a reflection of NX's project graph, which itself is just a reflection of how your actual source code runs its imports. So
That's right. That's right. Whatever limitations you can set in the project graph still applies. So whatever constraints you had before, they will work in exactly the same way.
sweet. Jasmeet, we see your questions. There's a lot of them there. So if you want to, it sounds like there's like some things you want to discuss a little more in depth. If you want to connect on the Discord, that might be a good place to do it. But I think we did touch on a lot of the questions. Like we have discussed, buildable libraries, how this helps with that, and how it kind of delivers on the promise that we originally saw with buildable libraries and like incremental builds. So a lot of this is like a full fulfillment of what we had hoped to accomplish at the beginning. The linking step is just so costly that without this in place, it kind of made this much more difficult. So I did want to hit this one real quick, just some questions about Windows. So we have been aware of the issues with Windows. We've been putting some resources into that to make sure it's working better.
We have core developers right now full-time using proper Windows, not WSL Windows, but like Windows. So
Do you still use Windows, Victor? Is that gone?
no,
for you now?
no. Like I don't use. I mean, no. Windows is fine. You can use it.
He's offended. I can't believe you would say that.
At some point, Victor had made a point that
Yeah,
he always developed in Windows.
Yeah. I think Windows actually is quite nice, and etc. No, it's Johnny Trona is on Windows full time. So and Krager is using Windows. We have a few folks on the core team right now that are either full time or part time on Windows to make sure the Windows experience is good.
Cool. So yeah, Nameless, if there's something in particular plaguing you, let us know. Discord may be the best place. You can tag us in for that. Now, another question here from Nameless. So I think this question kind of refers back to the question we saw from Catalina, which is just like by setting these types of repos, like by adding tags to them, you can add another level of like category onto how your projects interact and how they you can enforce limitations on that via our lint rule. I believe we can also at this point you can also use the tags to select certain almost like run groups. So you can say, hey, run everything with this tag, run the build on everything for that. So that is some ways that you can use this kind of like type libs to assist with some of this stuff. So yeah, that is something that NX helps you with. I don't know if that really ties into the new TypeScript support all that much, aside from just I guess maybe the question's more about type libs, like actual type libs, like TypeScript specific libs, but still the same thing kind of stays there. It's like if it's just a type library, then you can mark it as that via a tag. You can provide like that. That'll give you some way of lumping those together or grouping them, and you can use that into the task.
I think
running
there might be
limitations.
I think there might be one part that I think Philip also pointed out before the stream, which existing NX users trying out that new experience might be wondering about. Because like in NX, we often, or it's very common that you have like your libs or packages folder, and that has multiple levels of nesting where you group like the tags that you would distribute, right? You might have like, I don't know, products, and then you have like different projects per product, right? Grouped together, like domain areas almost, right? And so the only difference, or like one difference that is now in a new experience, if you want, like you can still have multiple levels of nesting. You just need to make sure that you adjust like the workspaces setting for npm workspaces. However, the name that you're using for imports cannot have multiple slashes, basically, right? Because like now we're using like the node level resolution mechanism, and it follows the like what npm package scopes are about, right? And so you kind of just have like one scope slash a name, right? So what we do right now, I think we normalize it with like dashes in between, and so that helps. As well as if you generate nested libraries, we will update your workspace JSON config, right, with those nested folders. Because you could say something like packages /*, which works in most cases, but there might be some variations where if for some reason this folder has a package JSON duplicated, it would kind of break, right? And so that's why we opted for actually, if you start generating deeper levels in nesting with like projects, we would update that package JSON workspace properly for you. But that's maybe one thing that might come up. But in general, I would say like test the new experience. Let us know on Discord. Reach out. We have weekly office hours. We would love to hear those things because then we can kind of fix them before it becomes a default.
Sweet. There's this point that Eduardo brought up too, is that so if you are using NX right now and you've been working in it for a long time, we're not going to there's not going to be a forced migration into using this. You can still maintain the path aliases as a way of like using those aliases, and we're not going to force you into the new way of things. Things for you will all still work the way that they have now. So you do have the option of going to the new way via a more manual step right now. But as we talked about, come NX21, we should have a 90% automated way of getting you there. So you can then opt into this new way and get yourself some really nice performance gains, which we think you probably will want especially if, as we have seen, like the user experience is identical. So it's a trade-off of you're not paying anything aside from the initial migration step, and the trade-off is performance gains. I think that's a good trade. So and yeah, an optional migration as a generator. I think that's likely how we will provide it, not as something that will be generated for you inside of the migration.json. I think that's probably still up for, well, we'll leave that to the core team to decide. But I think that sounds like a good approach to how to handle this. So, but yeah, we are out of time. But this was great. I enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Victor, for joining, and Juri for not sword training, so you could do this with us. But yeah, it was great. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out on Discord. We'll hit you there. And we're excited for y'all to get your hands on all the new TypeScript stuff. This is great. Cool. Any last words for us, Mike?
Yo gabba gabba.
Perfect.
Well said.
See y'all.
Bye.
Bye.